definitely focused on that one. How's Miami though?
Um, can't complain at the end of the day. At this point, I'm not single. So, like, just it's any other city, And we go to the gym, we go out to eat every now and then, but it's not like we're going, clubbing or anything like that. It's a city, much the same as Tampa is. I'm happy here. I could take it or leave it, kind of indifferent whether we move back to Tampa, whether we stay here, whether we move to Sarasota. Um, it's a good enough place, but we are leaving this apartment when our lease is up because we're overpaying for our specific residence. But I don't think that has anything to do with Miami. That's just this apartment in particular.
Definitely feel that.
Okay, gentlemen. Well, I didn't really type any the notes. I just kind of wrote a little lesson plan here in my journal. So, and it is gonna be a little all over the place probably. Hopefully my computer will be able to keep up. Um, But yeah, so tonight we are, what is it? It's August 11th. So um every year, the last couple of years in August, because it's my birthday, so I always kind of reflection and so I'm doing all these reflections and whatnot, but the last couple of years, what I did was I wrote basically like a brain dump when it's just like a page or two of like where I'm at, where I'm going, and like what's going on in my life and all that stuff. So I haven't gotten around to doing this year's yet. I did last year's in September. And like last year I had gotten sober. There was tons of stuff that was going on. So it's a really great exercise. I've really enjoyed doing that. But I'm starting to like read some of that stuff going into this year and also I'm just kind of like it's like a speed check for me, where I kind of just like tap the brakes a little bit and try to see where I'm at in life and just see if I'm moving in the right direction. I downloaded a bunch of AI stuff on my computer and it's just been super laggy lately, so forgive me for that. Anyway, so I one of the reflections that I wrote, and this was like 2 years ago. Let's see if I can find it. Because there's just something I wanted to point out from it is 30 lessons that I learned before 30. And I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm just going to share like a couple of them with you. It's this little cool little list that I made of just 30 things that I learned before I turned 30 or in 30 years. And um, one of the big ones, guys, is spiritual laws. That's number 21 on my list was spiritual laws. We'll talk a bit about spiritual laws as it goes too. But man, they're the operationalizing of the promises that God has put in to the world and into the Bible for us to be able to use. And the spiritual laws are like the operating system that the world exists in. And so like, on your computer you have maybe you have Mac or maybe you have iOS or Windows or whatever it is. Like there's these different operating systems and stuff, and that's how the spiritual realm is. There's a natural operating system in the flesh and in the world. We got gravity and we got all these different things, but in the spirit we have all these spiritual laws and stuff, and they're just as powerful and they're just as useful, and they operate whether we recognize them and understand them or not. So I kind of wanted to preface that with what we're talking about. Another thing that's on my list here is journaling. That's been a big deal for me. Is just writing out my thoughts, putting my thoughts on paper. A short pencil is better than a long memory, and just time management. so many things, accountability, personal development, dude, audiobooks. But we're not going to go through this list tonight. I just wanted to share a couple of those things because I thought they might be just a fun thing to reflect on. So that's I don't know that I'll do much with that particular list. But I just finished a book project that I am starting. It's like I got the outline now. It's 100 Great Quotes is the book, and I just got to like 101. So I'm gonna whittle that list down, probably add another 10, and then take 10 out, and then actually kind of make it into some kind of a book. I'll probably make a short book that's literally just the quotes, and then another one where I kind of expand on some of my thoughts around some of those quotes. Um, so a lot of cool little writing projects that I've been doing, but these little dumps and stuff are very helpful for me to kind of clarify my thoughts and just flesh out ideas and whatnot. But I'm going to take you guys into the book of James for a minute. So we were talking before we jumped onto the recording here. I'd love to try to make the video work, but if it causes it to lag, then I can't really have all that. But we're going to be jumping into the book of James, chapter 4. Um, and we're going to bounce around a little bit. We'll circle back to James in a bit. Um, but we're going to start with James chapter 4, verse 6. And we were talking before we started recording here about, how easy it is to just feel weary in the well-doing. We talk about that. It's not in the notes for tonight. Well, but it talks about in Galatians 6 the not to grow weary in well doing, for surely you shall reap um, if you do not give in, right? Or at the appointed time you will reap if you do not fail or you don't faint. And it's really easy to grow weary in the well doing, and a lot of time for me, the weariness comes from the wondering of whether or not I'm in the right place or moving in the right direction. Um, And so I wanted to kind of talk and speak to that a little bit tonight with you guys. Um, it's just where I'm at. This is my big pivotal season of reflection where I'm trying to figure out, okay, like, am I going in the right direction? Where have I been the last year? Where am I going? You can look at your habits and they will determine your future. You can look at your habits and you can tell, okay, this is where I'm going to go if I change nothing. If I'm eating pizza every night and skipping the cardio, or I'm not going to the gym, I'm not going to be in shape if I'm eating pasta and McDonald's and all this stuff. Like if those are my habits, sitting in front of the television, not exercising, not eating properly, then I'm going to get out of shape. And that is a result of my habits. And so uh, our habits are a really good indicator. They're a lead indicator, meaning they lead to, a certain result. We can see, okay, if I'm doing this, then this is what's going to happen. A lot of times, getting out of shape is a lag indicator of those bad habits. So you got lead indicators and lag indicators. And so we're in James, and we're talking about this verse here in verse 6. It says, but he giveth more grace, wherefore he saith, God resists the proud, and he gives grace to the humble. Submit yourselves therefore to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double minded. And then in verse 10, it says, humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and he shall lift you up. Being lifted up is a lag indicator. It is a result of being humble and submitting ourselves under God. So, what does that really mean? Well, we get weary in the well doing because we are getting tired of putting in the effort without seeing what we thought the result would look like. So often we don't recognize when there is truly a promotion taking place in the spiritual realm. We're talking about spiritual laws and the spiritual operating system that's running. And a lot of times we just do not even recognize how truly blessed and favored we are. And we don't realize that that is a lag indicator from the way that we have been moving and the way that we've been behaving. So, why is that? It's probably because, we just have this flesh mentality that's, oh my gosh, I should have been further along, or I should have, been done this, or I should have done that, or whatever it is. And or my life should look like this or whatever. And it's just our pride, it's our egos, right? And i um I didn't want to have this particular meeting tonight because I was like, you know what, I'm kind of tired of doing all these meetings, and my ego was telling me that maybe I don't need to do these meetings because I got other stuff I could be doing with my time. And, frankly, it just feels like a lot of time, there's not a lot of people that are attending the meeting in person. And it's like, a vanity thing too. It's like, man, I want to have, some guys that I can chat with about these things that can actually take this and have it impact their lives. And so I was gonna call my mom. My mom is like one of my best friends. And so I call my mom all the time. We're always just talking about nonsense. And so I was going to call my mom and complain but I knew exactly what she was going to say. So I didn't call her because I knew exactly what she was going to say. And so I decided instead to complain to my wife, who in turn said the same thing that my mom probably would have said, which is that, maybe you don't like doing it or whatever, but like you just don't know who's watching the replay when you post it on YouTube. And I was looking last week and I'm like, you know what? Not a lot of people were there at the meeting, but a lot of people were listening to it online. So, that was a lag indicator of the thing that I was doing. And it's also not about who's showing up. It's not about who is being impacted by the meetings and the messages and all the stuff. It's really about obedience, and it's about humility. And that's the thing about humility, is it just kind of sucks. And that's kind of what I wanted to share with you guys, because it's like God resists the proud. I start getting thinking more highly of myself than I ought to think, which is in Romans chapter 12, verse 3. And it says, don't think more highly of yourself than you ought to think. It also said in Proverbs 3, lean not on your own understanding. And so it's really easy for me to say, I don't know how God is using this, and I don't know, I don't see the whole picture. And it would be more comfortable for me to sit back and, load up a bowl of ice cream and watch some Netflix or something, or play my guitar, or keep working, or go to the gym, or just whatever I really want to do. But, the problem is that God resists the proud. And if you want to be able to be useful to God, you have to be able to be used by God. And that means that you're going to have to make sacrifices. You're going to have to do stuff that frankly just stinks, that you don't enjoy. Or, I enjoy a lot of this stuff a lot of the time, but, there's a lot of times that I don't. And it's just about doing what is right, because that is what you are supposed to do. And God gives grace to the humble. And a I can't remember exactly where this verse is, because I want to, it's in Proverbs for sure. um anyway, you guys know it says that pride goes before a fall, and a haughty spirit before destruction. Um so those are lag indicators. The destruction happens. And then, every time I see some kind of a destruction in my life, and I go back and I look at my journal, and I look at my behavior, and I look at where I was spending my time and my attention, all those things, I can clearly identify when I made a mistake 2 or 3 months, ago. And then I'm looking at my life right now, and I'm realizing, oh my gosh, I stopped tithing, or I stopped being diligent in this area, or I stopped being pure in this area, or I started, succumbing to temptation in this area. I started seeing that, oh my gosh, I started falling short, and then all of a sudden I could see the result of it downstream. So we'll talk some more about this stuff, but James chapter 4 is just a great chapter. It actually talks about how you have not because you ask not, right? And that's just a topic for another night, but just in the spirit of filling up the picture of this chapter for you, you get a lot of really great stuff. So he gives more and more grace through the power of his Holy Spirit to defy sin and to live in an obedient life that reflects both our faith and our gratitude for our salvation. Therefore, it says, God is opposed to the proud and the haughty, but he continually gives the gift of grace to the humble who turn away from self righteousness. So submit to the authority of God, resist the devil, stand firm against him, and he will flee from you. Come close to God with a contrite heart, and he will come close to you. Wash your hands, you sinners, and purify your unfaithful hearts, you double minded people. So that's James chapter 4. We're going to skip back over to the Old Testament here. I'm going to try to keep things somewhat tight here. Um, we're in Psalms 37, which is just another absolute monster chapter, especially when we're talking about humility. So Psalms 37 is all about humility. Starting in verse 4, it says, Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires and petitions of your heart. Remember, you have not because you ask not. You know, get out a piece of paper and a pen, write out the things that you desire, not the things that you're believing for or the things that you reasonably expect. Like, this is a great exercise that I've done a handful of times by now. Um, but you sit down with nothing else going on, and no phone or anything like that, and you just write out a list of like all of your dreams and like, not even things that you reasonably expect to accomplish or see in your life, but just start writing all this stuff out. And it's just a way of you know, listing your desires. It's actually a way of making your petitions. And then if you really want those things, then start believing for those things. Start putting in a plan, start adding those things into your 5 and 10 year goals and et cetera, et cetera. But delight yourself in the Lord. He will give you the desires and the petitions of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord, trust in Him, and He will do it. We don't have it in our notes for tonight, but Habakkuk 2, write the vision, make it plain so that those who read it will run. And though it delays, wait for it because it will surely come. Um, that's what I'm doing right now. I'm focused on Habakkuk 2. I'm rewriting my vision for, the next 5, 10 years. I'm checking in with my previously written 10-year goals and seeing how far I'm tracking along. It's embarrassing how little progress I've made on a lot of that stuff. But I digress. Verse 6 here, Psalms 37:6, he will make your righteousness, your pursuit of right standing with God like the light, and your judgment like the shining of the noonday sun. Be still for the Lord. Wait patiently for him and entrust yourself to him. Do not fret because of him who prospers in his way, because the man who carries out evil, wicked schemes cease from anger and abandon wrath. Do not fret, it only leads to evil. And then in verse 9, it says, Those who do evil will be cut off, but those who wait for the Lord, they will inherit the land. For yet a little while, and the wicked one will be gone. Though you look carefully where he used to be, he will not be found, but the humble will at last inherit the land, and they will delight themselves in abundant prosperity and peace. Again, lag indicator, abundant prosperity and abundant peace. Those are the things that we get to enjoy when we humble ourselves. It says at last, as in it's going to be a while. You got to not grow weary in the well doing, because at the appointed time we shall reap if we do not give in. So the humble will at last inherit the land and delight themselves in abundant prosperity and peace. Now we're gonna come back to this topic of humility, but I kind of wanted to share a little bit more about. It's like, okay, yeah, I get it. Do hard stuff, make sacrifice, and eventually, at last, we'll inherit the land and we'll get to delight ourselves in abundant prosperity and peace. That's all well and good, but it's Tuesday and I don't want to open up the meeting, or it's Sunday morning and I don't want to get out of bed and get to the church early so I can go and play worship, or I don't want to have to stay late and chit chat with people that are, or minister to people, or drive all the way to Orlando to go to some outreach event, or do any of the hundred things that, frankly, we need to do in order to die to flesh and die to self. Well, okay, this is a great verse for you then, if it's how you're feeling. And this is how I'm feeling. So these are the things that I have to kind of remind myself. And it's starting in Second Corinthians. We're going to go to chapter 12. Um, we'll start in verse 9. It says, "And he said to me," this is Jesus talking, "My grace is sufficient for you. My loving kindness and my mercy are more than enough and always available, regardless of the situation. For my power is being perfected and is completed and shows itself most effectively in your weakness. Therefore, I will all the more gladly boast in my weakness, so that the power of Christ may completely enfold me and may dwell in me." It also says, "So I am well pleased with weakness, with insults, with distresses, with persecutions, with difficulties. For the sake of Christ, when I am weak in human strength, then I am strong, truly able, truly powerful from the drawing of God's strength." So again, what did Jesus say? Jesus said, "My grace is sufficient for you. My strength is made perfect in your weakness." So for me, I'm constantly feeling, the weight of the difficulties, the having to do all these different things, and it's frustrating sometimes, and it's exhausting. And I'll give you that 9 times out of 10, I'm not sitting there thinking about how perfect his strength is being made during my weakness. I'm just pushing through the weakness, right? I'm just pushing through. And what has been so good for me, we talked about this word assiduity lately, is that there's year over year, I'm looking at these journals and these reflections of where was I, 2, 3 years ago? Where was I last year? And I'm beginning to see that there's this assiduity that is being developed, this resilience, this ability to just be able to keep going and keep pushing. And man, I have so many great brothers and friends that I really truly look at and I admire, and I just kind of shake my head like, man, like I don't know how these guys are just so diligent and resilient and just so enduring and stuff. But on the flip side, I know that I have a lot of brothers and friends that look at me and they probably say the same thing. They're like, man, he really seems to just keep pushing and just, be able to keep going, even though things get hard. And, frankly, I fail a lot. And, I don't know how often, this gets clocked by a lot of my friends and peers and stuff. But, dude, I fail all the time. I'm constantly falling on my face and stuff. But I just keep going. And I find that his grace is sufficient for me, that my weakness is what builds his strength in me. And I like that last part that he says that my power is being perfected, and it shows itself most effectively in your weakness. When you are weak, then I am strong. That's what Jesus says. So anytime you start feeling weak, just remember when you're weak, he is strong. We're not going to turn there, but in James chapter 1, it says, consider it nothing but joy, brothers, when you fall into various trials. Be assured that the testing of your faith through experience produces endurance, leading to spiritual maturity and inner peace. And let endurance have its perfect result and do a thorough work, so that you may be perfect and completely developed in your faith, lacking nothing. And it goes on, and I don't want to talk about what where it goes on to. We actually are going to go back to James chapter 2. So, okay, so we've identified that submitting to God, being obedient, and being humble is going to lead at last to delighting ourselves in abundant peace and prosperity, that God is going to give us the desires and the petitions of our heart. And I'm encouraging you guys to get very clear about what those desires and those petitions of your heart really are, and evaluate them regularly, excuse me. I look at my goals and the things that I'm believing for every single day of my life. Every single day, I have, at any given time, I have a dozen core goals that are time bound by the year. And I'm constantly focused on those things. And technically, 12 is like way too many goals to really be meaningfully pursuing. But I'm focused on those things all the time. And so I encourage you guys to be doing the same. But as you're moving towards those things, I got three or four of them that are highlighted because I've recognized in myself that I don't believe and I don't expect those things today. I don't really, we're in August. These are goals for the year, and we're more than halfway through the year, and I'm looking at these things, and I don't see it. And so I have those specific things that I don't really believe and I don't really see, and I can't really expect right now. And those are the ones that I'm looking for the Lord to kind of come up and meet me, because I'm going to move towards those things, and that's what we're going to talk about now. But when you have that weakness, or you start to have this unbelief and this doubt and stuff, it's not that you're doing anything wrong. If there's nothing, it's not that's bad. We just need to be able to say, okay, I have doubt and I have unbelief, but I'm going to still move. And that's kind of what I wanted to reiterate too, is, just following along and being obedient to God is a seed, right? And that seed is going to have a result. Remember what we just talked about in James. You got to let the endurance have its perfect result and do a thorough work so you can be perfect and completely developed in your faith, lacking nothing. And that's what is happening when I have these goals that I'm moving towards and believing and asking God for. But I need to say, okay, I'm believing for these things. And let's look at James chapter 2, verse 17. It says, so too, faith, if it does not have works to back it up, is by itself dead, inoperative, ineffective. So if I have these things that I supposedly believe for, but I'm not making any effort towards those things, clearly I do not believe in those things. And so for me, just trying to, on this past weekend at the conference, we had a church conference this weekend, and pastor was talking about how to hear from God. Well, everybody says they want to hear from God, but who's going in the room, shutting the door? No phone, no computer, no iPad, no agenda, right? Just quiet with their Bible and maybe some paper and a pen, and just praying and just interceding and then shutting up and just listening. It's like, okay, you want to hear from God, but you're not giving God an opportunity to speak in your life, then you don't really want to hear from God, right? And so for me, it's that faith without works is dead. And for me, this is such a crucial season for me because I like to have about 10 hours of just stillness and quiet, which when you say it like that, 10 hours, man, that doesn't sound like jack, dude. It sounds like absolutely nothing, dude. But if you we're in this crazy stimulation environment, with all these things going on, and if you have like 2 hours of silence and just nothing but you there with your Bible and reading and writing notes in your journal and praying, like you're gonna find that time moves pretty slow. So 10 hours is actually a pretty good amount of time. And so for me right now, I'm just trying to like take this time and have this stillness and actually, begin to pursue the answers to the things that I'm believing for so that I can know that I'm making intentional, meaningful steps towards the things that God is calling me towards and the things that God has for me in this new season, right? So kind of turning around third base here. We're going to go into First Peter chapter 5, and I could share more with James chapter 2. I'll read quickly through a couple other verses. It says, what does it benefit my fellow believers, in verse 14, if somebody claims to have faith but has no works? Can that kind of faith save him? No, it is not sufficient. Genuine faith produces good works. And if a brother or sister is without adequate clothing, asks for food each day, and one of you says to them, go in peace with my blessing, go keep warm and feed yourselves, but he does not give them the necessities for the body, what good does that do? So not only are we supposed to be making action towards the things that we're believing for, but we also need to be making action towards the identity that we have in Christ, which is to walk in unconditional love towards everybody. And that is so stinking hard sometimes. But to just, love is patient, love is kind, and sometimes I don't feel very patient and sometimes I don't feel kind, but that's who God intended for us to be. And for us to be able to recognize when I wanted to almost come on here and talk about like, how to, my original thought about tonight's topic was going to be um how to manage your emotions. And I just thought that that was going to be a great thing to talk about. And I don't think that I wanted to really give a comprehensive overlook of how I like to approach that particular topic. So that's why I didn't get into it tonight. But managing our emotions is so crucial, especially when it comes to at home, with our wives. Like, I have to give my dad a lot of credit because, like, my dad, he dealt with a lot, but he rarely ever showed it, or at least from my perspective and in my memory. Like I remember, like, yeah, of course, I used to get yelled at, and we used to get yelled at when we were being, frankly, insane because we were kids. There was 5 kids in this house just going nuts on each other. But like, who wouldn't, get a little bit miffed about that? But it's like, the more things that I think back, I'm like, dang, like, my parents, they did a really good, had a really great example of how to manage your emotions because, frankly, I know a lot of people who they didn't have the kind of life growing up that we had. And it was really, it's really bad for a lot of people. So we were very blessed for that. But I think about this now. It's like I want to make sure that I am treating my wife with love, and I don't want to have my butt kicked, like, I mean, get my ass handed to me at work and then go in and then give my wife a bad mood, or I don't want to like go into church and like not have, the right attitude, or I don't want to go into certain work situations and be carrying things with me, or whatever it is, and sometimes it's just you have to actually like choose. And since that wasn't going to be tonight's topic, we're not going to go into it too much, but it is a choice and it takes effort to manage your emotions and to always be able to understand it. It's perspective. It is your, bad minute doesn't have to be a bad day. Okay, somebody, cut me off in traffic and I'm not, it might have ruined my minute, but it's not going to ruin my day. It's not going to ruin my, whatever. So, First Peter chapter 5, and I swear I'm going to wrap this up. First Peter chapter 5, you guys all know it, but we'll share it one more time. Therefore, humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, set aside your self-righteous pride, so that he can exalt you to a place of honor at the appropriate time, casting all your cares, all your anxieties, all your worries, all your concerns once and for all on him, for he cares about you with deepest affection, and he watches over you very carefully. Be sober, be well balanced, be self disciplined, be alert, be cautious at all times. The enemy of yours, that devil, is prowling around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. And, a lot of times I'll feel myself, these little emotions like starting to come up in me. And I have to understand that that devil is prowling around. He's looking for any little opportunity he can use to try to get in and cause. It says where envy and strife is present, there's every form of evil. A lot of time for me, envy and strife comes from my ego. It comes from, man, XYZ situation didn't go according to the way that I thought it should have gone. So now I'm pissed off and now I'm going to bitch and moan about it. Now I'm going to give a fuss and all that crap. And frankly, it's just ego. The ego flaring drives the emotion. Like 9 times out of nine, dude, if I am getting into it a little bit with my wife, it's because of my ego. It's like, oh man, I didn't like the way that she responded to my behavior. And so now I'm gonna be a jerk. Like, no, 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 no. Like that is not the seed, that I want to be sowing here. And I'll tell you, if you've ever had a pregnant wife, or if you ever, have to deal with a pregnant wife down the road, be very careful. You're going to be walking on eggshells uh, for months, and it's going to really keep you on your toes. And it's such a great opportunity to get real-time feedback on, oh my gosh, like maybe I am a jerk. Maybe I have been, not behaving properly, whatever. Or at least, it's just for me, it's been put a magnifying glass on all my inadequacies. And I personally, I appreciate it very much. I don't often appreciate it when it's happening, but when I take a step back, I'm like, I should have played that differently. Or, I should have. Anyway, Galatians chapter 6. We said we weren't going to go there, but we'll wrap up here. So Galatians chapter 6. Says, we'll start in verse 4. It says, each one must carefully scrutinize his own work, examining his actions, his attitudes, and behavior. Then he can have the personal satisfaction and inner joy of doing something commendable without comparing himself to another. For every person will have to bear with patience his own burden of faults and shortcomings for which he alone is responsible. And it goes on to say, do not be deceived. God is not mocked. Whatever a man sows, that and only that will he reap. For he who sows to the flesh will reap ruin, and he who sows to the Spirit will reap life everlasting. Let us not grow weary or become discouraged in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap if we do not give in. So anyway, that was our meeting or our notes for tonight. I'll kind of give you just a real quick summary. God resists the proud, guys. He gives grace to the humble. humility is the key to divine promotion. Brothers, if you don't like where you're at, that's totally fine. Just submit yourself under God. Continue to sow and don't grow weary in well doing. Carefully scrutinize your own behavior, your own attitude, and you will be exalted at the appointed time. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. God's grace is sufficient for us, man. When we are weak, he is strong. Resist the devil. When you feel, man, and I know you guys know this, when you're resisting the devil and the flesh is like, yeah, but if I just entered into sin today, it would be okay because tomorrow I'll get, I'll resist the devil tomorrow. Like he can just come in for a couple minutes today and then he'll go, and then I'll kick him out tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll be better. Well, guys, the thing about tomorrow is tomorrow never comes. His grace is sufficient for us, but it is our discipline and our humility, our sacrifice that is going to lead to our abundant prosperity and peace. But anyway, thank you guys for joining. Michael, thank you for staying. I think that John had to go do some work, but yeah, floor is open. If you have some thoughts you'd like to share, just feel free to hop in and unmute yourself.
No, it was a good word. I think there's a fine balance between trying to figure out, am I, we're in the same boat with some of the things that we're focusing on, not just what you talked about, but just in life in general, are we continuing to do things out of habit or ego or responsibility or any number of reasons? Or are we trying to just abandon them because we want an excuse, because it doesn't feel good in the flesh? And I think we continually have to um, examine that, and I know the easiest thing to say is, oh, well, my flesh doesn't want to do it. So, it must be just my flesh talking. And a lot of times, probably most often, that will be the case. But there are going to be some cases where, you know, maybe it isn't just your flesh talking. And I think I don't have an answer as to how we identify that other than, like you said, spending time listening to God. And as Pastor Kevin loves to say, Dad loves to say, you toss up a prayer, whenever you feel like it, God's maybe he's going to answer whenever he feels like it. That's very different just sending up one prayer asking for it than setting yourself apart for an hour or two in silence and prayer and really seeking an answer. Those are two very different things, like you talked about. And I've been guilty of doing the first, tossing up a prayer either before I go to bed or throughout the day or when it's on my mind, but not setting myself apart for arguably really important questions that I have in my life, in this next change of season, where am I going to live, you know? I pray about it every now and then, but I haven't set myself apart for a couple hours for a day to really just intently pray about it. And that's what I need to do. So I really appreciate you encouraging me and giving me direction in that, because that's a failure on my part. You know, it's easy to say, God, give me the answer for that tonight while I'm sleeping because you're not having to do any work. You don't have to stay in faith. You just go to sleep and boom, voila, the answer is there. Like what's that? What respect does that give to God? Like, hey, God, I'm not going to give you any of my waking hours. Just you can have some of my sleeping hours because it's not anything that I have to sacrifice. And God loves to speak to us in dreams. That's not what I'm saying. God loves to speak to us in dreams, but if I'm saying, God, that's all of you that I'm going to give is my sleeping time, um, that's not a respect for him. And do I really value the answer that I'm asking for? Am I really value it if I'm not willing to give up any of my waking time and I'm only willing to give him a few prayers during the day and not diligently set myself apart. Um, what's that? I think it's in Isaiah, maybe, it's about Daniel diligently praying. Uh, it's in Daniel, and he says he weeps and fasts for 3 full weeks, 21 days. And the God says, from the moment he started praying, the word was released, but there was a spiritual warfare in it. But God knew his heart. He knew Daniel was going to be, God knows everything. He knew Daniel was going to be committed for the 3 weeks to receive that answer. He didn't just say, you fasted for 3 weeks, you wasted your time. No, God knew, he's going to be intently pursuing this answer. And you know what? At the end of the 21 days, he got that answer. So I don't, there's a whole lot. This could be a whole sermon, to say, whether, God, release the word and God can't, the word can't get through to us because there's spiritual warfare, or if God's waiting for us to really dive in before the word's released, that's a whole something else. But in this particular case, this was important to Daniel, and he fasted and prayed for 3 weeks for this answer. And if it's important for us, which I feel like it is, this question that I have now is about my future, and it's important to me. I need to set myself apart. And you were talking about 10 hours. Um, it's if it's important for you, you will put 10 hours, you'll set 10 hours aside. And if it's not important to you, but a lot of the things that we're praying over, if it's something, oh, do I go to this concert or do I listen to this music or something like that? Okay, maybe you don't need to dive into. But if it's a question like what I'm praying for, like it's just something that could um influence the trajectory of the rest of my life. I'm being a little traumatic there, but who knows if I stay in this city for a year and I meet the right business connections, or if God wants me to move and I never get into the place. These are important questions that could influence the trajectory of the rest of my life. And really, what is an hour or 2 hours or 5 hours or 10 hours or 24 hours of prayer compared to the rest of your life? So I haven't been, that's a failure on my part that I have not been diligently seeking an answer from the Lord over this particular situation, or really any situation that is at the top of my list. And that's a failure on my part. And I appreciate you really, you weren't calling me out directly, but you were just encouraging us, about is it valuable to us? Is it worth it to us? Where's the value that we put in it? Are we really setting ourselves apart?
Yeah, I would say that it's much easier said than done, but it's just for me so hard because my phone's always ringing. I always got tasks. I always have the amount of time that I have in the day is already so, tight, just by the nature of my routines that it's hard sometimes to carve out. And for me, like Saturday is the absolute best day. And I haven't had my Saturdays for a while now because, things have been going on. But I like to just take Saturday and just go into my office for 3 or 4 hours. Nobody's calling me. I don't, have my phone. I don't have the computer on or anything. And I can just sit there. I can read in the Word for like an hour or 90 minutes or so, and then just start really opening up that level of communication. And he talked about it on Sunday, but it's like you have to really be able to get the presence of God in order to actually hear from God. And so, how do we activate the presence? And what I've been doing, because my time is limited, is I've been using that approach, the trifecta, where I'll pray, I'll intercess for like 10 minutes, I'll read in the word for like 10 minutes, and then I will sing some praise and worship for like 10 minutes. And so then in 30 minutes, I can be like right in the kitchen, like right in the hot seat, like right in like I can feel the anointing. And not all the time, but a lot of the time I can just feel the anointing. I'll end with the praise and worship, and I'll just have, like when we go in and we're going to pray, or when we're going to play praise and worship at church, and we just take a minute or two to start praying, just it kind of prime the atmosphere. And so I've been trying to do that daily, just kind of prime my environment using those three things. But when we are really in the presence of God, like He's actually with us, He's actually there. And then you start saying, okay, you know, here's where I've been, here's where I've been going. These are the things that I have been spending my time on. These are the things that I really want to be spending my time on. These are the questions that I need answers to. And then you start going back into the word and start trying to figure out, like, and he just leads you through the word. Like he'll lead you to the scriptures that will speak to that particular situation, because the word is alive. It's a living word. And like, so anytime that I'm doing these types of reflections and stuff, where I do it in the end of the year, the beginning of the year, and the middle of the year, which is like right now in August. I spend a lot of time doing this and really trying to just kind of dig in and tap in. And I do some smaller ones in other checkpoints throughout the year, but these are like my really big ones where I really evaluate, hey, this is where I want to be in 10 years. And here's the progress that I've made in the last year towards that. And, half the time I'll be going out and I'll scratch things out that last year I thought that I was going to be, believing for the direction I thought I was going to be moving. And sometimes I just will table those things, and then sometimes he'll bring those things back. And so being able to be dynamic is good, but it's a seed, really, and it's like, how important is this stuff? And I think a ball that I've been dropping and I'm trying to pick back up is just having, okay, these are the things that I'm believing for, and this is the direction that I'm moving in, but then going and getting an individual word for each and every one of those things, which is very easy to do, and then getting an individual seed for each and every one of those things, which is harder to do, but not impossible. And then just doing them, getting my word, and, basically comes down to like speaking that word every single day, which is incredibly hard. It is incredibly hard to remember to sit down, and if I'm believing for 12 different things, declare these 12 different things using the word that I was given for those individual things, and reminding the Lord of the seeds that I have sown for those particular things, or taking more time to press in for those particular seeds. So it is a lot that I'm working on trying to put together here now, and it takes a lot of time, a lot of intentionality, and it's just so hard to just shut everything off and just say, I have a dozen things that are clawing for my attention right now, but I'm not going to do any of those things. That's why Saturdays have been so great for me, because I have a lot less things clawing for my attention on Saturdays. So it's easier for me to sneak off for a couple hours. I might start doing it on Sunday, because Saturdays are just really getting busy. But yeah, man. Awesome topic, I think, because the humility is, it's a seed, and it's like, it's not whether or not we are humble, it's like, how humble are we? How willing to submit are we? How eager are we to hear from the Lord on these particular topics? And like we're talking about doing the stuff that we're doing, and wondering if it's just our flesh that is telling us that we don't want to do this thing. And I have to keep answering that question with a yes because it just feels like, for 4.5 years I've been trying to quit this group, but we just we just keep showing up.
Yeah, yeah. All right, well, I'll stop showing up then, and maybe that'll be the answer. And
No, I mean, not just you. I mean, if you weren't here, probably I would just probably start streaming, or something like that, which I really don't want to do. But for me, it's like I still have to show up. I still have to. It's like an effort. Even if you're the only one that's here, I send a dozen text messages, before we get on to here. And it's just I also have to understand that it's a seasonal thing as well. When guys get busy in the summer, guys get busy in the holidays and and just the fact that I can still show up is just more a testament to your and my commitment than other people's. A lot of other people they don't got it like that.
well, um, hey, God's doing mighty things in my life. God's doing mighty things in your life, and I know it's difficult out there for some people, but the answer's in His Word. So, God has me and you here, and hopefully, if they're not here, God has them in the place that they're supposed to be.
Yeah, all I can do is pray for these guys. It was so good to see John, and I know Kyle's been doing his um, meetings. I popped in one of them the other day. There was a whole bunch of people in there, so I mean, I'm happy with that. I think I don't want this group to be something that I'm taking in any kind of personal way. You know what I mean? I just want to do what I'm supposed to do, and I haven't felt the peace about moving on. I've felt a lot of friction about showing up, but it's like just because I'm feeling friction and discomfort does not mean that I'm doing the wrong thing. It just means that I'm having to make a sacrifice.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you feel like it's just your flesh who's saying, don't do this, and you keep showing up, there's great reward, like the Bible says, there's great reward in what you're doing. You're sowing the word, which is the greatest thing you could be sowing. And you got people, like, I guess you're right, if they're just watching the YouTube videos, you don't necessarily need to be live, but, if the Lord tells you to change it, the Lord will have you change it. Um, you probably wake up at 6 in the morning and do a live, there, and then have the rest of your day and your evening together. But
Yeah.
you know, God, God will give you the wisdom.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think I was definitely a little bit frustrated this morning, but maybe I was just a little tired. I'm like, oh man, I don't want to do all this, but you know what? It's a seed, and I could count on, well, I wouldn't say I could count on the fingers of one hand the amount of times that I really, really was fired up about jumping on these meetings, because that would be a gross mischaracterization. Because there are a lot of times I'm very pumped about the meetings. But there is definitely significantly more meetings that I have to drag myself to than meetings that I am like pumped about. So it's just, I think, part of it too. Dude, we got this one-legged duck. Did I tell you about Gimpy?
No.
Yeah, dude, we got this little one-legged duck. There's all these ducks in our neighborhood, but there's like one with a little, his like web part of his foot is like gone. So he's just got like a little stump and he can't really put weight on it. But he comes around, and like I've been feeding him like the last couple weeks, and we call him Gimpy. It's so funny, dude. And the other ducks, they kind of bully him a little bit, so we've kind of, you know, we've been taking him in a little bit, feeding him like little bread and stuff. Les was chasing off the other duck the other day. It's the funniest thing.
Dude, I'm there.
bro.
We
We,
got
we we're like feeding him and we're like throwing like bread and he's just like eating it, and then all of a sudden he just like poops just like out of nowhere, just squirts poop everywhere, and then like goes back to eating. I'm like, like, what the heck did you just do, bro? Like, we're feeding you, we're keeping you safe from the other ducks, and then you just literally poop where you eat. Like, what is that? But he doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know his body functions. He's just a duck.
well, we have tons of cats in our neighborhood, but we don't really have any ducks, so but you know what they say, you gotta get your ducks in a row. So
Yeah, well, it's like in the springtime, you see those ducks literally rode up. There'll be like one or two mama ducks, and there'll be like a dozen little chicks following behind them. It's kind of funny. There's a little pond like in the corner here, and there's just always ducks, dude. It's crazy, but I think I'm gonna pop this thing